All right. Hello and welcome to Around the Horns, the show where we talk about all things regarding the University of Texas baseball team. I'm Aaron. I'm here joined, as always, by my co-host, Zach. Zach, how you doing today?
Good. Wish this last week had been a little prettier from a Texas baseball standpoint, but lots of upsets last night, so that's always fun to see.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you mentioned this past week. Zach, we do this show once a week, about 6, 7 days in between. I don't know about you, but to me, it feels like it has been an eternity since our last show. So much stuff has happened since our last show this past week. I mean, at the time of our recording last week, we still thought Tanner Witt was like on track to pitch on Sunday. He's now been ruled out for the year. Texas lost 4 games since our last recording, which we didn't know. We thought it might take a month for this team to lose 4 games. That suddenly shifted. The baseball lockout ended. Oklahoma and A&M both got left out of March Madness. Tom Brady unretired from football. A bunch of other stuff happened. Did I miss anything? I mean, why has so much stuff happened since our last show?
Yeah, I feel like, it's only been 7 days since we recorded last, but it feels like it's been a month. It feels like it's been a long time. Yeah, just zaniness around college, baseball in general, teams getting swept that had swept a ranked team the week before. And yeah, the sports world, everyone's turning their attention to March Madness. Well, it's been more March Madness than baseball, if anything. So I have a bold prediction on that one. They lose.
Yeah, I don't think it's too bold. I think the spread is like Texas -1 right now. So yeah. I think a lot of people agree with you there. Yeah, we'll see about that. But getting into some baseball. So a little bit different format today. I'm going to throw some different players at Zach. I'm going to throw some different scenarios at Zach. And we're going to go back and forth, and we are going to rate how much confidence we have in that player, that situation, that prediction on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not confident at all, 10 being extremely confident. So we're going to run through a lot of different categories there. And then at the very end, we will preview the upcoming weekend series against Incarnate Word here back at UFCU Disch-Falk Field. Finally, this team has been in South Carolina for a long time. The state of South Carolina continues to just offer no value. I don't know why it has to be. It's just a bad place for the University of Texas.
Yeah, Texas they had actually never lost to South Carolina. They were 7-0 going into Saturday. And that includes a national title game in 2002. That includes, I think it was the 83 national title game. I think they beat them in 75 as well. So, and of course, they swept them last year. This is a by far weaker team from South Carolina this year without Wes Clark, who was just monstering home runs. And then they lost their top 2 pitchers. And yeah, it was ugly.
And then to cap it all off,
fast.
Then to cap it all off, they lose to the College of Charleston. General rule of thumb for me: anytime you lose to a school that starts with "the," I don't like that. It's just not a good look. And I mean, weather permitting, Texas got a game tonight against the Citadel, so hopefully that does not repeat itself. But all right, so let's get into some big picture stuff here. So we're gonna go 1 to 10. Zach, rate the confidence. I'm going to start it off just Skylar Messenger. We know it's been troublesome at the plate lately. How are you feeling on his outlook for the rest of the year, where he's at right now, 1 to 10?
Yeah, I think, probably a 3. Look, the kid can hit. We've seen him in the Big 12 for 4 years or 3 years, whatever it's been now. He's a career 280 guy. He averages 36 strikeouts per year, 40 hits or so. But this year it's been 10 hits and 18 strikeouts, and he's looked bad doing it. I mean, even the hits, like he had one yesterday where he looked completely lost. Like he didn't know which pitch was coming, where he was at. Maybe he's, the tornado like picked him up in Kansas and dropped him on his head in Texas. I don't know what's going on, but I say 3. I think he'll somewhere end up in the 250 to 260 batting range. I hope. But right now, he just looks like he's a mess at the plate.
Yeah, I think you say 250 to 260. I think a lot of Texas fans would take that deal if you could promise an ending average of that, based on where he's at right now. I'm at a 2 right now. Out of all the struggling Texas hitters, so you talk about Messenger, Daly, and Campbell are kind of the 3 struggling hitters that have been mentioned the most. I think Messenger is the one that worries me. there's a lot of mechanical issues going on with that swing right now. His head is moving all over the place. He's really lunging at the ball. He's really crowding himself. It's just, you see like Trey Faltini or Murphy Staley, they're standing up pretty straight. They've got a really smooth swing. It's nice and quiet. Messenger has stuff moving around all over his swing. There's some, Texas getting close to Big 12 play where they're going to start to see even better pitching than they have been lately, especially on like Friday nights against some of the top arms in the country. So when you combine both of those things, I'm at about a 2. I think it's hard. I think some major mechanical adjustments are needed. And I think it's hard to make those adjustments during the season, especially when you're trying to game plan for different starting pitchers and you're trying to have productive at-bats, So I'm at about a 2. But Zach, my question about Messenger is what can David Pierce do about it? Because they've tried Peyton Powell off the bench, Gavin Cash, everyone they've tried off the bench hasn't really worked yet. I know those guys haven't really gotten many at-bats,
Yeah.
Where should he go from here? If, should they maybe think about benching him? And if so, where could they even go?
Yeah. It's an interesting dilemma, right? Because Murphy Staley is that all around utility guy. He can play at third base.
Yeah. Then you could just slide Dylan Campbell over. So
you slide Dylan Campbell into right field. You put in Powell at DH. Gavin Cash is not, he looked really good in the fall, but he's not there as a freshman. No. The dude bites his jersey, which drives me crazy. No, I think that the major issue though for Pierce is he loves a strong third base defender.
Yep.
And Murphy is solid, but he's not strong. He doesn't have the biggest arm. One of the things that Skyler brings is he's played third base and he's played infield a lot. I don't know if, he made some pretty good plays this year defensively for Texas. So he's got a way that, do I give him more time? This guy's got a lot of experience. He's got a lot of Big 12 experience. Or do I go with a guy that, has mostly played a kind of a peripheral role in the team over the year? I think it makes more sense long-term to give Murph a shot at third base. And if he fails utterly on the defensive side, again, slide Messenger back in there and just put him at the 8 or 9 spot. Yeah, there's not a lot of love there from the dugout to have a replacement for him. If it was a second base kind of option, there might be some different things you could do there, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's tough because at the end of the day, I still think this team is pitching a defense. So if the best defensive lineup is with Messenger at third base, and I agree, he's made a lot of pretty impressive plays, on slow rollers and pop flies, like in foul territory. He's really good at both of those in particular. So yeah. It's a tough call. We'll see if he gets
the one last thing to mention about Messenger is, interestingly enough, if you look at his numbers at Kansas, he actually hits better in Big 12 play than he did out of Big 12 play.
Well, there you go. Problem solved.
So, maybe 2 weekends from now, he starts mashing all over the place. I doubt it, but it's something to keep in mind, right?
that would be nice. That would be nice, no doubt. So you mentioned second base there briefly. Speaking of second base, the next guy I want to throw at you is Mitchell Daly. Freshman All-American, all Big 12 preseason this year. A key part in the lineup last year, just a very solid hitter. We both thought he'd have a really good year. He got off to a horrible start. He picked up 2 hits last night. He's had a couple base hits lately. Mm-hmm. Overall, where's your confidence at with Mitch Daly?
I had to think long and hard about this one, but I think I put it at a 5. I saw enough work and, 61 games. He started 59 as a freshman last year. He was a freshman All-American second team. He was an all Big 12 first team guy that hit 316. Like, I've seen the body of work at Texas that I think he, once the light kind of comes on, I think he's fine. I think the moving him up into that protector role against Ivan or after Ivan,
yep.
I think that really threw off that whole mindset. Even I asked Pierce about it after the Bama series, I believe it was. And I said, Pierce, that's a really surprising role in the lineup for him. He's struggling. What do you drop him? What do you do? And he said, no, he draws a lot of walks, which he has. He's second on the team. So he's a patient guy, but his patience seems to wane as he continues to get deeper and deeper. He's not one of those guys that will foul a bunch off. And so it's led to a lot of strikeouts. He's hitting 10 points below the Mendoza line right now. And he, early on the season, he looked bad. The last couple of games have given me a little bit of hope. Last night, he looked really good. He was hitting in that gap to gap power, which is what he's known for. He's staying within himself. He's not moving all over the place. The breaking ball still gives him a bit of an issue, obviously, but so does a lot of guys. So, I could see him ending in the 270 range hitting wise, which is, 80-point improvement, but
yeah,
it's still a long season. We still got 40 something games to go. So
yeah, no, I mean, so you've got him at a 5. I'm going to put him at a 6. So I'm way higher on him than you are. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
So there have been some encouraging at bats lately. We know when he's at his best, he's hunting those outside fastballs. He's ready to drive him to the right field, right center gap, but he also has the quick bat to turn on him. I think lately the ball's down in the zone and the ball's in. He just hasn't gotten to him. There's been a lot of rollovers. He seemed to tick late. There's been a little bit more swing and the miss in the bat than there was last year, a little more than I expected.
Yeah.
But I still think he's starting to turn around a little bit. Just how good of a season he had last year gives me a lot of confidence. He's got the experience of, Big 12 plays. You mentioned he played in Omaha. So he's got all kinds of experience in big spots. So I do think he'll turn it around. He's got to get that short swing back. He showed some pop last year. It'd be good to see him get some of that back. So, it's unrealistic to think he's going to match last year's numbers at this point after the slow start. But I do think he'll turn it around a little bit. And, they've got to stick with him. We mentioned the lack of options kind of at third and in the outfield. They've got to play Mitch Daly, no matter really how bad it gets. There's not options there. That would really, the middle of the diamond defense would get thrown off. He plays a solid second base. So, he's going to play. So hopefully he does figure it out for the Texas team.
Yeah. I mean, they can slide Jack O'Dowd that Vanderbilt transferred in there quite easily, but Jack O'Dowd looked way overpowered in his very limited at bats. Now, granted, very limited at bats, but somewhat like Gavin Cash, he looked pretty overpowered at times. So not sure I'd be switching out Daly's, lack of productivity for someone that's a complete unknown at this point going into.
We know what the ceiling is with Daly because we saw it last year. So
exactly,
you might as well just ride it out and see if he can get back there because, the odds of someone else coming in and doing better are just not worth the chance of, maybe letting Daly work out of his slump and get back to that ceiling where he was last year when he was, kind of the biggest bat in the lineup besides Ivan, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. All right. So moving on, we're going to change it now. We're going to go to the pitcher's mound where there have been some major issues ever since the Tanner Witt injury became official and he is now out for the year. So the guy that picked up the last couple Sunday starts was Lucas Gordon. He's been good at times this year. He's been shaky at times. Last couple outings haven't been great. So where are you at with Lucas Gordon, 1 to 10?
So Lucas, I'm probably going to be a lot higher than most people would expect. I think I'm going to put him at a 6. The guy's got a good arm and he has deceptive movement. He's not a Pete Hansen, but he has somewhat similar traits in that he is effective when he's controlling and locating his pitches. He's not going to overpower you, but when he's got that fastball running in on your hands, and then when he has that breaking ball working away from you, he's hard to hit. Before the UCLA game, there wasn't a lot of time for him to think about it. The way that went down timing wise for anyone that's interested is Witt had an injury during the Alabama Sunday start. It didn't bother him so much that he wasn't ready to go. Up until game time, he was pretty much ready to go. He said he wanted to go. Pierce alluded that he wasn't quite 100%. So they decided to scratch him as precautionary. They did the scans and obviously found the existing injury and said, you know what, this is something we got to take care of. But, in the Hitter-Finley Park at South Carolina, I think that really kind of did Lucas a disservice and his first true start on the road against some higher level competition. He was rushing his pitches a little bit. The days before, you could see him standing at the edge of the bullpen talking. He was mentally getting ready, but I don't think he was mentally ready, to be honest. And the other thing his batting average against actually is lower than it was last year when he had a over 6 ERA. So I think long-term, I think Texas will be okay. Allen's got his work cut out for him, but just settle him down, have the pitcher, he's got Hansen, which is a super senior. Lean on that guy and talk to him. That's what's best for that guy right now. So,
yeah, I agree. I was going back and forth between a 4 and a 5. I'll settle for a 5, I guess. The thing with Gordon I want to see is I just want to see him get ahead in the count, because you mentioned that the stuff's pretty good. It's not crazy, but it's pretty good, especially when it's in the zone. But if he can just get ahead in the count, that way the hitters don't know what he's going to throw. Just get that breaking ball over for a strike early in the count. Just keep the hitters off balance. That's what Pete Hansen does really well, and that's why guys don't really hit Pete Hansen, because he's got the command that you talked about, and then he can just throw any pitch at any point in the count, and the hitters aren't going to know what's happening. Gordon keeps falling behind in these counts. It's leading to a few walks. He's hit a couple batters, and he's just kind of putting himself in more trouble. You mentioned the batting average against. It's not like he's getting slapped around, and the balls are just all over the gap. He's kind of doing it to himself by putting himself in bad counts and in bad situations. So the thing I was thinking of, I was trying to picture him in the bullpen, and bullpen, same thing. You got to get ahead in the count. You got to throw strikes. We saw them stretch out Luke Harrison last night. Do you think they're considering moving Gordon out of his starting slot, maybe into a bullpen role? But it would be tough to do, to take someone like Harrison out of the bullpen right now, because the bullpen's already thin.
Yeah. When Pierce first mentioned that they were looking at Harrison possibly extending, I didn't give a lot of credit to it, because the first thing that pops in my mind is Staley's the first guy out of the pen on Fridays. Harrison's that first guy out of the pen on Saturdays, because that gives you that lefty right matchup, and then it gives you the righty lefty matchup, and it works really well. Luke has also just had ice in his veins. I mean, he's given up a couple more runs, which I think is just natural for a freshman on the road. He's never seen this much amount of work in college. If I were in Pierce's shoes, no, I would not move Luke into a starting role. I think it's too early to try to extend him. We saw him go those 3 innings against Bama. He was playing in the confines of Dishfall Field, really shitty weather.
Yeah.
That's not a hitter-friendly park, and he had the wind blowing in. That'll save a lot of pitchers. And so I think the fact that Lucas has been, he started a couple games last year. He started in his, historically in high school. He just seems to fit the mold better as a starter. He's a cooler guy. He's not a big fiery guy. Luke gets fired up, but yeah. I don't think it works moving Luke out of the pen, because they're going to need that stopper. So
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Last thing I want to note about Lucas Gordon, both of his starts have come with Kimball Schusler behind the plate. They gave Ardoin the day off on Sunday against UCLA, and then this past weekend it was the second game of a doubleheader, so they gave Ardoin the game off again. That's something that it shouldn't matter, but it does. As a pitcher, you just want the best catcher back there controlling the game. You trust throwing the breaking balls low. You just trust the guy because he's caught so many games. So I expect to see Ardoin catch on Sunday if Lucas pitches, and I'm interested to see if maybe that can shake it up for him. It might not, but just something that I wanted to note.
Yeah, Ardoin is known as one of the best defensive catchers at framing pitches for a reason. That guy is a maestro behind the plate. I mean, Pitching Ninja's shown him a couple times, and he's been called out on social media for just being an absolute artist back there. And that's nothing against Kimball at all. Kimball's a solid defensive catcher.
Yep.
But he's not Ardoin. And having a young guy like Lucas, I think Pierce has to put Ardoin out there for Lucas to help him, start to control that zone a little bit more. So
yeah, I agree. All right, so I'm going to move on to 2 more pitchers. I kind of want to lump these guys in together. They're 2 guys that don't have much experience pitching big innings for Texas, but they are 2 of the guys that have shown they have been at least decent lately, which we can't say about too many of the Texas relievers recently. And that's going to be Justin Eckhart and Marcus Olivares. Eckhart's gotten a couple. Eckhart got the extended outing yesterday after Andre Duplantier kind of melted down. He also got the start against Texas State last Wednesday. And then Olivares has also had a couple solid appearances out of the bullpen. Texas is looking for quality innings right now, especially in the midweek, and especially bridging the gap from the starters to the Staley, Harrison, Nixon combo. These are 2 guys that have kind of jumped out to me. So, 1 to 10, where are you at on Eckhart and then Olivares?
So Eckhart, apologize to Justin, but I'll put him at a 4. And the only reason I put him at a 4 is I haven't seen him extended. Pierce has been, in some ways, maybe a little bit too quick to pull him so far. maybe not to overextend him and wear him out, but he's always been a guy that's had a lively arm. He's always had a guy that's had solid movement on his fastball, good spin rate. But this is a guy that in 2019 came off of Tommy John surgery, goes into 2020, and basically the season's canceled before he ever gets a chance to really make it back and, make an impact. 2021 really doesn't play much because, the rotation was set and he was still, in some ways he'd been 2 years off at that point. He's still feeling his way back. So we've got a guy that has not thrown a lot over the past 3 years. He can throw strikes. He scuffled a little bit against College of Charleston, but I think that was more so like it's out of the norm. Like I think everyone, including myself, expected him to be that Wednesday or tonight starter.
Yeah.
And so they threw him in just because they had to. They had to have a guy go eat up some innings. So I think long-term, he's definitely a guy that could go 5 innings in the midweek and really solidify that midweek starting position. I expect him to be the starter against A&M on the 29th right now. They're not going to roll Dre out. That'd be very bad news. So
no, they're not going to do that.
I say 4, but I think that he has a ceiling of a 7, right? Like he's got a guy that has talent. He just needs time to prove it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I've got him at a 5. He's been throwing strikes. You mentioned it, and that's more than we can say about a lot of the Texas relievers lately. He's been throwing strikes. The thing is, he hasn't done well the second time through the order. You mentioned Pierce, not really, Pierce had a quick hook with him because both times, second time through the order, they've started to get to him. He hasn't really shown that ability to really pitch and navigate the order multiple times with a lot of different pitches. So that is something he needs to improve upon, but I think that's something he can improve upon with more outings as he gets more comfortable pitching multiple innings, as he gets more stretched out and his body just feels better, going through the process of throwing an inning, sitting down, then going back to the mound and then going back to the dugout. That's something you got to get used to. So I think he's going to be the guy going forward in these midweek games. I hope he continues to throw strikes because the stuff is pretty good. So it's definitely enough to give you quality innings in the midweek game. And then I'll go quickly on Olivares. I got him at a 7. He's been throwing strikes too, and the stuff is pretty good. It's not overpowering, but I do like the breaking ball. He's shown the ability to throw it for a strike in the zone, which, as I mentioned, that's a really big thing for me. I really like when pitchers are able to do that, especially out of the bullpen when the hitters are, thinking, oh, new guy to the bullpen, I'm just going to hunt a fastball. If he can flip in that breaking ball for a strike, I really like that. Outside of Staley and Harrison and Nixon, it's been rough. They need someone to bridge the gap from the starters to those guys. Right now, I think Olivares is probably the top guy for me in that slot. He hasn't pitched much, but he's done good with the outings he's had so far.
Yeah, so for Olivares, I have him at a 5. And maybe I'm giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt. Just, looking at his numbers at Lamar, it was nothing overpowering or impressive. But he's come in, and as you said, he's pounded the zone with strikes. He's averaging a strikeout per game, per inning. But he also hasn't been extended. He's been in there, and he's been that 1 inning guy, just to kind of a glue guy to get to the back end. And if he fills that role, that's great, right?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. Yeah, because
conceivably it could be like a Hansen, Staley, Olivares, and then Nixon. Kind of, Texas has always had a guy like that. He's always been that 1 out or 2 out or 1 inning specialist that they've like, hey, come in and get this guy and you're done.
Yep.
We've always had that. So, I give him props for coming in 15, maximum 15 pitches every single inning. And he's just continues to mow down guys. So yeah, but props to that guy. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he continues to, I'm sure he will continue to get chances, and it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of keep rolling. So, all right, shift gears a little bit. Zach, 1 to 10, Texas will win the Big 12 regular season. Where do you rank that statement?
Man, this was a tough one. Let me say this: if they had Tanner Witt, I would put it at an 8 or a 9.
Yeah, I would too. Yep.
Nothing would have scared me if they had Witt, even with the loss of Todd and some of the other, just things happening in the program. I would put it at 8 or 9. With the loss of Witt, they're going to lose some Sunday games.
Yep.
It's just the way it is, right? Like Hansen's going to have an off night, or Stevens is going to have an off night, or Lucas is going to get touched up. And so they're going to lose 4 or 5 games that they probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So I put the number at 5. That's my confidence level.
Yeah.
I still think that the biggest competition looks to be from Texas Tech and from Texas themselves.
Yeah.
Texas has to get their heads back on straight. They got to get back on track. All these teams, a lot of great teams in college baseball, they'll start really hot and then they'll hit a cold snap and then they'll get hot again. What you don't want to have happen is stay hot all the way till the end of the year and then you can't hit at the postseason. A la 2010. Texas couldn't hit the ball to save their life. Game over, right?
Yeah.
Texas Tech, they've been rolling right now on hitting. They haven't played exactly the biggest competition. I'm looking at you, Merrimack. Come on. Is that even a real school? Have we like they're playing high schools in Lubbock now?
The Merrimack or just
But Tech has a really good starter in Birdsell. He's been lighting it up. But their bullpen and their starters don't scare you after that. They're not as strong as they are 1 through 9 in years past, but the top of the lineup, the top 4 or 5 guys are, really good. But what I've seen from the Big 12 so far is that every single team, for the most part, has one guy on a weekend that can go win you a game.
Yep.
Texas has 2 guys. So if I'm looking at the field and I say Texas has 2 guys and everyone else has 1, it makes it easy to say they have 50-50 chance of winning the Big 12.
Yeah, no, I like that pick. I'm at a 4. I don't want it to seem like I'm completely out on this Texas team because I still think they're good. I still think they're solid. But in the Big 12, if you give me Texas or the field, I think I would have to take the field at this point just based on what we've seen, especially, the offense did a good job against quality pitching against Tennessee and LSU. But besides those 2 games, when they run into a starter that gets hot, the offense can be a little problematic. And where that concerns me is if they run into a buzzsaw against, Tech's number 1 guy or Oklahoma's number 1 guy or, Campbell at Oklahoma State, and they drop a Pete Hansen game or they drop a Tristan Stevens game, that could easily turn into a lost series all of a sudden when you talk about potentially losing on Sunday where, a lot of the Sunday games are going to be coin flips for Texas at this point, and unless guys really step up. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on the offense for the Friday, Saturday games because they're going to have to win those Friday, Saturday games if they're going to want to win the Big 12 regular season title, just because Sundays are going to be crazy. They're not going to lose every Sunday by any means. They could win a lot of their Sunday games. This offense still has a really high ceiling. Mm-hmm. The pitchers could figure it out, but there's a lot of pressure on Hansen and Stevens all of a sudden to lock up those Friday, Saturday games. And it's not like they're going to be pitching against bad pitchers as, we're going to see some pitchers duels. So I'm going to put it at a 4. It's a close one, but I think I would have to take the field at this point, which isn't that bad of a thing. It's not the end of the world if they get second in the Big 12 in the regular season. All right, Zach, last one. Texas will host a super regional. So there's a lot with this one. Top 8 national seed, and they win the regional. So both of those things happening. Where are you at?
Yeah, I think on this one, I'll go with 5 again. When I look around the landscape of college baseball right now, there's a lot of parity. You look at teams like in the ACC, those teams are going to beat the crap out of each other. Just like last year, there's some really good teams there, but can they run through the table and just make a statement for themselves? I don't think they can. It's going to be an up and down season. They're going to drop 2 here. They're going to drop 1 over here. You look at the SEC, they're going to do what they normally do. You're going to have 4 or 5 teams that are really, really good, and everyone else looks like muddled like 500 because they got beat by all the really good teams. Yeah, exactly. I think this year, more so than others, you could see a team like Liberty or a team like Campbell, something like that, sneak into that top 8. But right now it's getting a little late for them to make some of those statement wins in order to have that top 8 type seed. So from what I've seen from Texas and what I saw from last year and what I think of this team ceiling, I think they'll be in the top 8. They're not going to be at a 1 or 2 anymore. But I can definitely see them as a 6 or a 5 or 6 or 7 seed. So, I think they have a very good chance to make a super regional as a host.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I'm at a 4. So just a tick lower than you are again, but really not that much more. Top 8 feels like it might be a little tough for me, but the thing that I am kind of holding out hope for is, you mentioned it, the rest of the country, there's just not a lot of dominant teams. the SEC is going to cannibalize each other like they always will. So, they'll have 2 or 3 top 8 seeds, but they're not going to have 5 or 6 this year. It doesn't seem like. The ACC kind of the same thing, which you touched on. So if they are able to win the Big 12, they're probably going to be a top 8 national seed. I think Hansen and Stevens can get you through a regional because, when we get into Big 12 play and we get into especially the regional and the super regional play, the pitching management is going to be a lot different than what we've seen up to this point. I mean, Hansen and Stevens will throw 110, 115 pitches to try to go 6, 7, 8 innings. They'll let Travis Daly go 2. They'll let Luke Harrison go 2. They'll try to get 6 out saves from Nixon. They'll bring Nixon in the 7th. I mean, they're going to be a lot more aggressive with how they use the really good pitchers in the back end of the bullpen, which, we've seen all these midweek games. These teams are going all out to try to beat Texas. They're pitching the weekend starters. They're stretching out the closer. They're doing everything they can, which makes sense because if you beat Texas in a midweek game, it really helps out your recruiting. It's a big deal. You get a lot of likes on Twitter. It's fun if you do that. So
yeah,
when Texas starts to manage as aggressively as some of these teams have been against them, it'll help Texas. So I'm going to put it, I think it's probably more likely they end up around a 10 just because I don't think they're going to win the Big 12 necessarily, but I'm not going to be surprised. And as I mentioned before, it's going to be important that they do end up a top 8 seed because this team's a different monster when they're in their home ballpark, especially with Hansen and Stevens on the mound.
Yeah, and that I think that's the big sticking point there. Like when they get into a regional, it's hard for teams to beat Texas at Disch Falk Field because of how it plays. And then you get into a super regional, it's even harder because Texas fans are going to be there. They're going to be loud, and that team's going to be fired up. I've seen years in which Texas really didn't necessarily belong in Omaha. 2018 comes to mind. 2014, I think it was, comes to mind. Like they were a year early, or they just, they kind of gritted their way through. And, it's a special feeling at Disch Falk Field when it comes to regional and super regional time. It's a special place. The other thing that we didn't really touch on, but the number of injuries around the nation has just been unbelievable. Landon Sims just announced that he's out for the year with the UCL injury, just like Tanner Witt. Tanner Witt obviously went down. There's been a lot of injuries. LSU potentially has lost their top guy in Blake Money. They claim it's just a wrist issue, but that dude wasn't even touching the ball when he came off the mound, and his arm was hanging straight down. So it's a long college baseball season. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And another thing, you don't have to be a top 8 seed to host a super regional. There could always be an upset.
Yep.
A 2 seed could knock off a 1 seed, a 3 seed could, and you could still host as a 10, 11, 12 seed, whatever it be. So, all right, Zach, thank you for going through that exercise with me. Hopefully that helps Texas fans get a better picture on where this team is at with a lot of different players. We've got Incarnate Word coming in this weekend, last weekend of non-Big 12 play for a while. You have any quick thoughts on that series, what we might see from those guys and, how we think it might play out for Texas?
Yeah, for sure. It's an 8-5 team on the season. Their best win has been a Saturday matchup against Houston, who's, that's a solid win.
Yep.
Their Friday night guy is going to be Garza. We know that for a fact. Their Sunday guy is going to be Zavala. We know that for a fact. Zavala has done decently despite a +7 ERA. I'm not sure how that even happens as a starter. But Garza's been good. He's a sub-2 ERA. He's 2-1. His lone loss coming at Houston. They've got 2 guys that can really hit. I think it's Rogers and
I've got it written down. And Roberto.
Yeah.
Bridge and Roberto.
Those 2 guys can hit. But other than that, everyone is a little iffy. They haven't really played any top competition. So, they got beat by a solid UTSA team, 6-0. At the end of the day, I think Texas is going to be back at home. They're going to be excited to be back at home. I don't think they're going to be looking forward to Tech. I think they're going to be like Pierce is going to have them centered and
I agree.
Get their minds right. And I think they end up sweeping this weekend.
Yeah, it's weird that, all of a sudden we're at a point where in order for me to confidently pick Texas to sweep Incarnate Ward, they've got to be playing at home. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. I think it's a good spot to hopefully regain some confidence. You get back, sleep in your own bed, eat your normal breakfast before the game. go through your normal pregame routine, get back out to the dish. There'll be some fans out there. They'll be eager to see some wins after this past week. I'm going to go sweep. I think Hansen, definitely sets the tone as he has most of the year. He's going to be eager to right the ship. Same thing with Tristan Stevens. And then, if hopefully Texas has worn down the Incarnate Word pitching staff by Sunday and they can kind of mash some runs. Some of the guys we talked about can get the bats going a little bit going into conference play. So, I think it's all of a sudden this is an important weekend, because if you drop one, God forbid two this weekend, this team's not going to be looking good going into Big 12 play. So I'm going to go sweep as well. Not as confident as I would have been this time last week or 2 weeks ago, but yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah, you got anything else to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, I would just say for Texas fans that are jumping off the bandwagon or just freaking out right now, if you look at all the great Texas teams, and I say great, they got to Omaha and won a national title or were right there, finish up runner up. They all experienced their struggles either early in the season or even late in the season. There's never been a team that just kind of mowed everyone down in recent history. And so it's a long way. I wouldn't get too down or too high on any win. This is a team that under Pierce that likes to grind. Like, if you could have 100 Murphy Staleys on this team, you would love so. But the Murphy Staleys, the Trey Faltinis, those are the guys that are going to keep grinding away. They're not going to just, give in and throw the towel in. And so, I think that they still have everything to play for, right? They can conceivably win tonight, win this weekend, and then beat Central Arkansas and go into Lubbock with a 5-game winning streak, which looks a lot different from, yesterday or today. So yeah, they're going to keep playing. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of lost me there after you said 100 Murphy Staleys, because I just started imagining a team with 100 Murphy Staleys. He's like my favorite player right now. That team's 56-0. It's undefeated. I don't know if he's a good pitcher, but I know they're putting up 20 runs a game because that team's on fire. So if he can just pitch at all, that team's going undefeated. But yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree with what you said. It's a long season. Baseball's up and down. Some guys certainly need to step up, but hopefully that'll happen soon. And with that, we're going to get out of here. So be sure to leave comments on the video. You can give us your 1 to 10 rankings on the various comments and on the various sections, and other guys that you want to give a rating to. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube page. Check us out over on Orangebloods.com. We've got a lot of stuff going on. Zach talked about March Madness, spring practice rolling around for football. Us too, we have a lot of baseball stuff. So Orangebloods.com is a good place for all of that. Twitter handles, you can find me at Aaron Little OB on Twitter. You can find Zach at the Dish. And interact with us. We always love talking with we'll talk Texas baseball with anybody pretty much anytime. So yeah, with that, see you guys next week, and hook 'em.
Hook 'em.